Australia's latest economic and fiscal update is set for release tomorrow morning. And by all reports, it doesn't sound good. Let's bring in my economics panel. Tonight, joining me from Melbourne is the Herald Sun's Terry McCrann, and in Sydney, the Australian's economics editor, Adam Creighton. Adam, let's start with you. What are your predictions for tomorrow?
Well, look, I think it's pretty clear the Treasurer is going to announce the biggest budget deficit since the Second World War, so that is quite historic. And it won't just be the biggest, I think, this financial year. I think it'll be a record also the following financial year, given the massive collapse in revenues that we've seen and, of course, the ongoing spending. So, that's obviously a great headline. We've already seen, much of the detail in terms of the extension of JOBKEEPER and JobSeeker. So I'm not too sure what extra bits of information will be released. Certainly, it will be very nice if we heard something about bringing forward the tax cuts, the 2024 tax cuts, to, say, the 1st of January. But I'm just guessing at that. I don't have any inside information.
Now, Terry, if this is the worst economic crisis we've seen since the end of World War II, how long will the recovery take?
That's the $64 billion question, I think, Rita. Let me say that these are the deficits we had to have once the government decided to order the economy into recession. The deficits are going to happen on two levels. The first level was simply the flow-through of that recession to revenues. They fall, and the increase in spending that automatically takes place. But then in addition to that, the government had to embark on the spending on JobSeeker and JobKeeper to compensate for that very direct hurt that it was imposing. We can have a debate over whether that was the best way to approach the virus. I think Adam and I would argue that they should not have closed down the economy as harshly as they did. But having made that decision, they then had an obligation to pay those extra payments to the people and the businesses they were directly hurting.
Well, yes, and they are overhauling and extending JobKeeper and JobSeeker, but 2 million workers will be off wage subsidies after September, and 1.6 million people on the dole will lose $300 a week. Adam, your thoughts here? Is this the right move by the government? Does it go far enough, or does it go too far?
Look, it's certainly a move in the right direction, I would say. They have to lower the rates and they have to narrow the range of eligibility for both of the schemes, especially the JobKeeper scheme. Look, I was a bit surprised that they extended it until March. I think that's so far into the future. That's basically 12 months of this extraordinary policy, which is an extra $20 billion roughly, as we know. But certainly it's a move in the right direction, and I fully understand the politics of the situation. Just on the politics, it's interesting because, by extending it until March, they're obviously kicking the can down the road, obviously closer to the next election when the real economic pain is going to be. So I thought there might have been some argument to get it out of the way, if you like, but clearly the government hasn't decided on that.
And Terry, we are operating blind here because of JobSeeker and Keeper. We really don't know the true economic data. What is the real unemployment rate in this country, for example?
Let me just quickly comment on Adam's point. I think the extension to March is validated by cutting and tapering the payments. If they'd left the payments for JobKeeper at $1,500, JobSeeker at the extra payment of $550 and extended the lot to March, that would have been very, very silly, totally over the top. But by tapering them, I think that it's a reasonable thing to do. And I think that the reality of Victoria, 1/4 of the Australian economy coming out of, in a sense, nowhere into recession, and that's likely to continue much longer than the 6 weeks originally forecast. I think that also validates the extension because this is having a big impact on the rest of the Australian economy. But as you say, Rita, what is the real unemployment rate? The way I calculate it, when I take into account those that would have been sacked but for JobKeeper, it's still somewhere close to 20%. This is going to be a very, very hard road to hoe, not just for the economy, but obviously for a big slice of the Australian public.
Adam, do you agree that the real unemployment rate in this country is close to 20%? Because that is a shocking figure.
Yeah, look, certainly it's about 15 to 20%. It depends how you define it. But certainly the traditional definition, the conventional definition is is extremely conservative, the 7.4% figure that we have at the moment. Even the ABS itself, I think, says that if you factor in the workers who are on 0 hours and those who aren't looking for work, that the unemployment rate is something like 14%, and that of course is the official agency. I think if you look at the Roy Morgan figures, which is a more realistic definition of unemployment, I think they put it about 16%. So certainly, look, it is very, very high, and I think generally, I think this this crisis throws up the question of whether the statistical agency should be looking at the official definition of unemployment, because it certainly doesn't accord with what the man in the street or the woman in the street would think is unemployment. It gives a very rosy, rosy view of what the situation is, which of course suits the government of the day, but it's not the reality. So yes, no, but look, I think it is nearer to 20 than it is to 7.
Now, I've got to just ask you quickly, Adam, you've written a lot about the cost of this lockdown, the human cost. I started the program talking about the medical experts, mental health experts talking about a surge in suicides. Do you think we're now veering into territory where the cure is going to be worse than the disease?
Oh, look, I think we're well in that territory. I mean, I was fairly hesitant back in April about saying things, but I think every week that goes by, the data that flows in, not just in Australia, but around the world, makes it more and more gobsmackingly obvious that this is the extraordinary overreaction to this disease by governments around the world. And the cost is just gargantuan. I mean, the IMF puts it at $12 trillion just over 2 years. I don't like talking about it in dollars and cents because, as you say, it's livelihoods. It's about people in work. It's about their freedom to, to enjoy their life, especially young people who suffer the most by far through this response. So yes, look, I think it's far worse than the disease. I mean, there was a story in the Financial Review just today that 500,000 Australians apparently have been exposed to the coronavirus. Well, this just makes a complete mockery of the response in Victoria, if that's true. Why would you go through this extraordinary economic pain if a full 500,000 people have already had the virus? It's completely bonkers.
Abzan, you look at how Taiwan managed this crisis compared to us, similar population, much closer proximity to China, and yet they never closed their economy, and their death rate, infection rate, everything is better than Australia, even though we are blessed with the distance we have for much of the world. But before I let go of my panel, let's just have a quick look at how some people are coping or not coping in the age of COVID.
Right?
Why? Why are you going to call the police?
You're supposed to keep 2 metres apart because the virus is going on at the moment.
I'm in a car.
Doesn't matter.
I'm in a car.
Doesn't matter.
What are you on about?
You haven't got my problem, okay?
I'm in a car.
So
How
go.
am I meant to keep 2 meters in a
I
car?
get my phone out and call the police.
What are you on about?
Go on.
Do you ever look at someone and wonder what is going on inside their head?
Goodness sakes.
So not everyone's coping well there. First case from the UK, a woman calling the cops because the car next to her wasn't socially distancing, and the one from the US with a woman with a tape measure upset that people weren't far enough apart at the banks of a river. Terry, people have lost their minds in this crisis, and it's kind of depressing to see neighbours turn against neighbour.
Well, I think what we saw there, Rita, is examples of the ordinary person taking their cue from the stupidity that politicians in particular and bureaucrats have demonstrated right through this crisis. I mean, Adam's talked about the big picture, the overreaction, shutting down the entire global economy to treat this when there were better ways of doing it. But time and again, as we see with the Victorian quarantine situation, Ruby Princess, etc., the nursing homes, everywhere, it's just stupidity all the way down.
Oh, absolutely. I'm with you there. And I wonder if we're going to see scenes like that right here in Australia, particularly in Melbourne, if this lockdown continues much longer. Thank you to my panel for their analysis tonight, Adam Creighton and Terry McCrann. Thank you.